Welcome to the Reel to Reel podcast, where the stories behind the board go on record. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, and we're to give you an insider's look into the audio industry. I'm here today with my co-host Drigo and our guests Aaron Gandia, Ed Krout, and Matt Kamm from Phat Planet Studios.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Well, fellas, Ed, since you're the owner and founder of this studio, can you give us a little bit of history on Phat Planet?
Sure. We opened in 1996, so it's been a long road since then. Starting with very meager and early finances with just a smattering of equipment, but the studio has been a continual growth since that time, and it's been 27 years now, with a lot of great music under our belts since then. But the studio grew out of a desire of myself and my my business partner Brian Carrion, who had passed away many years ago from an illness, to design and implement an audiophile quality recording studio that really focused on the sound quality, the delivery to artists, a great experience, and a place to nurture the artists to do the best thing that they can possibly do. But with that key focus on the sound quality, the audio quality being the finest that it could possibly be. So we've kept that ethos throughout, and building on that after all these years. So it's a legacy that we're pretty proud of and have enjoyed, and I think a lot of artists nowadays do appreciate it. So that's why we have so many regular clientele that come back to us time and time again. Many artists who are on their third and fourth record with us now too. So it's great to see that.
Very nice. Very nice. So in terms of everybody, because normally we have like one or two people, but just for our listeners, can you guys just tell us a little bit of background from each and every one of you guys, and maybe like some cool accomplishments?
Aaron Gandia here. I'm the chief engineer at Phat Planet Studios. I've been with Phat Planet for 18 years now. And Ed and me have really gone through a lot to develop and build the studio, a whole bunch of upgrades, from just acoustical upgrades to audio upgrades. And Ed has been such a great boss to allow me to experiment and build equipment, build speakers, and then just drop it in the studio and force everybody to listen to my stuff, and have all the amazing engineers that we have as good critics to all these experiments that Ed and me like doing with audio. And my background is I'm a drummer. I have a bachelor's degree in music with concentration in arrangement and orchestration, which I kind of did that because I wanted to steer my approach in engineering to mixing. And one of my professors just kind of said mixing is the equivalent to writing a good arrangement or orchestration. And that just kind of clicked in my head. And I guess I've always had that in the back of my mind. Then I did Full Sail as another degree, where I did actual recording arts. And after that, I've just kept on studying and learning throughout the years, and using Phat Planet and all our wonderful clients as lab experiments for all this stuff.
Nice.
They like it too.
My name is Matt Kamm. I'm the director of artist relations at Phat Planet. Background, I grew up in Orlando, pretty much got a guitar at age 10 or 11, and within a few weeks, I had joined somebody's band. They had a band, but no singer or guitarist. So just kind of jumped in the fold and was playing almost instantly. A lot of those guys are still my best friends, speak to them on a daily basis. I played a lot of concerts. I just dove straight into that first, churches and house parties, and then moved on to, Will's Pub at 16, even though we couldn't stay after we performed because it was 18 and up. But I really cut my teeth, playing a lot of different styles of music. Out of the necessity recording became a thing, and this would have been kind of right around the turn of, I would think, the home recording studio revolution with computers. So that's where I really took off, and I wanted to play everything. I still do. Synthesizers came after that. Production really just came out of necessity, and I really fell in love with the recording process. You could build any world that you wanted, or potentially things you've never heard before, and try to chase them. So what I think, part of what I do at Phat Planet is really relate to the artists. I've been in a lot of different scenarios to where I've worked with hip hop artists, I've worked with psychedelic artists, I've worked with orchestration, so really bringing that to the table to try to understand, well, what do you hear? What's going on? What are you trying to accomplish? And then integrating that into how we can make a plan of attack to get there.
So it's kind of more like you take their vision and then you're like, cool, this is how we can help you.
This is how we integrate it. Yep.
Cool.
And it works out great with us because then he'll pick which is the best engineer and producer suited for that artist and does a really good job on it. Besides his vast knowledge of just huge music library and all the research that he does, then he can just put all that together and say, okay, let me get this producer, this engineer, let's hire some of these musicians and let's put all this together, and then just kind of stays in the background supervising everything. And he does the real role of an A&R from that traditional point of view, from a record label, of like the hand holding, the all the conversations that need to happen to make sure that the process is going correctly.
And inspiring creativity.
Oh, heck yeah.
Thank you.
So someone can just come in and just like know nothing and just say, I just want to make this, I play guitar, and then you could just take that idea and run
to a
with
degree. It always helps.
There's got to be some talent in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't manufacture that.
Yeah.
We were discussing, before the show, tuning,
Right.
writing melodies for an artist. The better prepared that an artist comes in with, as far as talent, as far as writing, vision, the easier it's going to be for us to be able to reciprocate that energy. So
Right, but to your point, we've had singer-songwriter come with a guitar and some lyrics, and says they want to produce a whole track from it, and it'll be Matt and me in the studio, and we're playing all the instruments, and within a 5-hour session, we're building an entire song for them from scratch. And by the time we're done with the song, from where it was to where it ends up, it's a whole other song, and they get to be an integral part of that development and process, which just really inspires them and just kind of gets them going with there's a lot more energy and involvement to them than somebody just kind of programming something on their computer and they don't necessarily have a direct involvement. We're trying to get them to be part of the conversation with the whole thing. And for what we do, I think it works really well.
And I think an important part of that is that there needs to be a song to begin with. That's Tom Dowd told me the three most important parts of a hit record are the song, and the song.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So without a song, you're not creating the song for them in terms of the germ of the idea.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, there's been times in the past where we told them you're not ready yet, or the song is not ready yet.
Right.
Go back and get your stuff together and bring us a completed song. And sometimes we have to go down to basics and tell them, okay, here's the verse, here's the hook, here's the bridge. I can't tell you how many times I've produced songs for people where they didn't have a bridge, and I had to write a bridge for them. They didn't understand what that was, and it's just part of song form, part of what makes a song interesting. And but it's part of what we all do. I mean, I'm particularly in the jazz world. I've arranged and produced countless projects for artists where we have to prepare, rehearse, and get it groomed for coming into the studio so that once we get there, we have a fun time and it's successful and productive.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, I think it's brave as a studio owner to tell someone you're not ready yet. Go home and start over.
Oh, yeah. You got to.
You got 2 weeks. Come back.
Yeah, no, I mean, it gets to a point where at some point we don't want to be none of us want to be stuck in a session that's not going to be productive because we're not enjoying it and the client isn't enjoying it either. They're not going to get that special vibe and magic that somebody should get, that by the time they come into a studio and they come out of a studio session, they feel that something has changed for them. Their music, their inspiration, their vision, they have grown as an artist by the time they get out of the studio. And if we're not providing that service for them, then we're not doing our job.
Right.
There's other places that you can go to where you can just sit there and then work your ideas out at a more basic level and learn. And then eventually come to us if you feel that we'll provide what you need. If we need to sit down and change our process and say, well, if you want to come here and learn with us, then we will provide you different producers and musicians and we can work through that process also. But for us, we want to enjoy this as much as the client should enjoy it.
Yeah.
We have a very, very adamant and philosophy that we don't believe in push fade or cash check. We absolutely can't stand that. So any audio engineer, any studio that has ethics about them will do the work to make the artist great and sound great and feel great about themselves and not just sit there and, do the work and be a robot about it.
Just get the 3 takes and then cool, we're good. We'll figure something out.
Right. Exactly.
No, and we don't want to comp endless vocal tracks. We want the artist to perform.
Yeah, I think a lot of the bands get a little startled when they come to us, and our facility is like a 7 tracking room facility. And we have this set up so we can have, we've done everything from a 3-piece band to a 20-piece big band, everybody live. And we basically force the band to play at the same time, all isolated, but they play the songs live, top to bottom. And I guess the norm has changed so much that becomes, they get startled and jarring. It's like, are you supposed to track things at the same time? I'm like, that's how you play live, right? Do you get on stage just a drummer, then just a guitarist, and just a bass player? No.
That's hilarious.
And I feel too like that can come from the whole home studio revolution thing, because nobody or very few people really have the ability to record multiple things all at once. And this is just to say with like the number of preamps that they have and just everything as far as like the room and how it sounds, that you really have to in a home studio to basically overdub everything and record everything separately.
Correct, which now means that the production needs to change because the feel is going to be different.
It sounds different.
Right. So then depending on the type of band, if we know they're well rehearsed, I'll put a click track on them, but the click track is just going to be an 8 count.
Right.
Ready, set, go, meet you at the end, and we'll do a couple takes until it just feels awesome. If they're the type of production that they feel like, no, we would benefit from having a click all the whole time, and they've rehearsed it that way, and then they want to add some other elements to it that require some programming, well, that's a well thought out plan. We'll have the click, we'll move anything else, but it still has to feel right. If I'm hearing a song that they're playing on a click over and over and it feels so rigid, I'm going to turn off the click and see how it feels that way.
Right.
And then deal with it. If I have to tempo map the entire song because that's the right feel to do it, then we'll do it.
So basically do whatever it takes to get that kind of old essence of people playing in the room rather than you got the drums, then the bass.
Yeah.
The idea is to serve the song.
Right.
Don't serve the ego of the artist because sometimes they're their own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Serve the song. Do what the song needs because the song will tell you.
Correct.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that that as listeners of records or songs, one-offs, it's really about transmitting energy and emotion and the human experience. And we've even been in vocal tracking sessions where I don't believe it, don't feel it. They're phoning it in. So a big part of that is sometimes we'll make people get out of the studio and run laps, jump up and down. I need to hear you get excited.
That way you can hear like they're tired, like they should be.
Out of breath.
Because
Or coffee.
if you don't, if
Coffee's a must.
if you aren't truly feeling what you're delivering, how is anybody on the receiving end gonna feel that?
Right.
That's true.
Same thing I've had to do with singers. I listen to the lyrics, I read the lyrics, and there's a lot of emotion attached to them. But when I hear them singing them, they sound so well rehearsed that they're devoid of that critical emotion that was what inspired the lyrics. So I've had to literally get into psychology and break them down in the studio to get to a point to make them feel what they felt, so that I've had clients just almost break out crying in the middle of a session, and I don't stop recording. I just let them get through it and then figure out what we can use, and then keep moving on and building from that. And then I've played that back, those type of recordings, on some of the classes that I teach and music production. And immediately you can see in the faces of the students that they hear that emotion in the vocal.
Right. Yeah. So I was creeping on you guys' website, and I noticed that you guys are using Source Connect now. So can you guys explain a little bit about Source Connect, why you would use it, maybe a little bit of what it is, if maybe our listeners don't know. And is this something that you guys implemented due to COVID, or did you guys have this before COVID, or, just kind of talk a little bit?
We had it before COVID because we had gotten into TV and film quite some time ago doing
Post-production.
ADR work for movies and TV shows. And of course, really it all started with the blow up of the streaming TV shows. That's where really the volume
So many films
of production gained. And also shortly after, Atlanta really started blowing up. So we pick up a lot of the offshoot talent that works in Atlanta, and they come through Florida, or they live in Florida. So what Source Connect basically is a software that connects through Pro Tools and allows us to drive picture and send audio simultaneously. So basically, it is CD quality audio. There is a little bit of compression in it, but not really terribly noticeable. But it allows bidirectional audio between the host studio, which would be us, and the recipient, which would be the post house or post-production studio, let's say in LA. They're able to hear the talent, and then at the same time we're sending time code through the software, and they receive it on their end. It engages the picture. So the moment that we hit play, their system instantly hits play as well. The picture is locked, and they're able to hear the talent speaking their lines in sync with the picture. That is the game change that Source Connect created to allow remote ADR work. So prior to that, ADR had to happen in the post-production studio directly. So the ADR had to fly to wherever they were doing the post work before Source Connect came about. They did try it many years ago with ISDN and things of that sort, but there was always compromise, always, because it didn't have the sound quality. There was always too much latency. So when Source Connect happened, it's an expensive buy-in. It's not something cheap.
Yeah.
Because it's a pro thing, so it costs thousands of dollars to get into. So not everybody does it, but it is there, and we use it on a regular basis. Since COVID, though, a lot of lower budget shows opted to just work with Zoom. Yeah. So the ones that don't care about the perfect sync and they don't care about the perfect sound, they're fine with Zoom. Those are like the B level TV shows. They're fine with it. And what Aaron does, or any of our engineers, they sync. They put the picture that we're looking at, the TV show or the movie, they put it on Zoom, so they're able to see it on their recipient screen, along with the talent speaking, and it's sort of okay. It's as good as Zoom's going to be, but it's good guide. And then of course afterwards we ship them the final audio through FTP, and they've got it.
No clicks or internet pops, right?
No, that's fine.
It shouldn't. I mean, we're recording anything anyways. So if they're hearing a little noise on their end, they'll just literally say, "Can you play it back?" just to verify, or they'll ask if there was an issue with the recording. And
You know who doesn't care? Are ad agencies. They will record the Source Connect on their end and take it and run with it.
Wow.
They don't care because it's voice.
Yeah.
They're
that's
just
true.
doing a TV or a radio ad. That doesn't have to be that good. But the film people, they're more precise. They have to have good sound. They have to have the full res waves, and they expect that delivery, right away.
Yeah, I guess at that level, like they should, right? They should
Correct.
be asking for some of these different levels of quality.
What I think since COVID and Zoom, the expectation of the viewer has dropped a bit
Oh yeah.
in terms of what they accept. I mean, watch TMZ and their calling. And we did last season was all done on Zoom, and we had a couple of shows entirely full of space monkeys, as Bob Katz called them.
I love it. I love it.
That's one of
well,
my
listen
favorite
to the
terms.
music also
Yeah.
on these streaming TV shows, all so computerized and so in the box sounding. Really, there's not a lot of good music being composed and produced. A lot of it's needle drop, which is just taking library tracks
Right.
and spinning off a TV soundtrack out of it. So one of the things that I really wanted to do and be passionate about was doing film score, live film score with real musicians, and we never were really able to get that off the ground just because nobody wants to spend the budget to do it, to pay musicians to play.
Especially like with like virtual instruments, with
Right.
how they are now. Everybody's so happy with just like, I could just put it on my keyboard and do the layers and
Use the Abbey Road strings. There you go.
Yeah, but it's that same guy all the time.
yeah.
That's the thing. We all know that we gain so much by bringing people into the room
Sure.
and letting them interact with each other. You get 3 to 5 times more out of the music than if it was just one person
Oh yeah.
composing and producing by themselves. That is two-dimensional as opposed to musicians working together and interacting with each other.
Especially like a lot of the hits, if you really look at the credits, it's not just like one engineer, one producer, the artist. It's a collection of different people all working together, either in the songwriting or, sometimes you'll have multiple engineers that just kind of touch a couple different things. And then, maybe one of them will do pitch correction, maybe one of them will do something else. And yeah, I agree with like a collection of multiple people. That's really when you come out with something that's not just good.
Absolutely.
It's better than
Yeah.
good.
And that brings up my next question is, I know, Matt, you said you match the engineers and producers with the artist. How many engineers do you have available?
6?
Yeah, I think it's about 6. Still mom and pop.
Yep. That's great, though. I mean, that's
And everybody's got a different specialty
Right.
exactly.
Right.
of what they're really passionate about.
yeah,
That's really what's important too. And also when we meet young engineers, guys that want to come in and be interns and or assistants, I really try to encourage them, get good at something. I've never met an engineer or a producer when they always say, "Oh, I love all kinds
do
of music
everything."
and I do everything."
Yeah.
No, you don't. You're not good at everything. You're only good at the music that you grew up with, that is embedded inside of you, and that is a part of your world and your life. That's what you're good at. Now, spend time and get really good at that, and then now you'll be a bankable asset to somebody.
Yeah, niche down.
And at that point, that's when you can start integrating other aspects, because I think we can all probably agree we don't listen to one style of music, but there are things inherently that are the foundations of sonic exploration.
Right.
So that's when you can start to have real fun. Telling Aaron, my next record that I wanted to make is psychedelic electronic country with bossa nova rhythms. So that's something I'm gonna explore. You just wait.
He will pull it off.
And
I'm ready.
He will definitely pull that off.
Bring it on.
And you listen to it, you're like, yeah, it sounds exactly like that, and I'm enjoying it.
And that's what music, to me, recorded audio is always evolution of the sounds and building upon, the past and incorporating that with the new technologies.
And in just to get into a side conversation with that, we have 3 different generations here of musicians between here on from Phat Planet, and I think with each generation how popular music changed. I grew up different from Ed, where you definitely would have your style of music that you would listen, and your groups of friends would just listen to that one style. And I'm a 90s kid, so then I was coming up with the resurgence of hip hop from the U.S. market, but also Latin hip hop and reggaeton in Puerto Rico, where I'm from. And I would have the whole 90s grunge rock, but I was also into metal because of the guitarist in my band. But coming from friends in Puerto Rico, we would do reggae, ska, and then I got into university and I wanted to study jazz, so I got into jazz and fusion and Latin jazz, all that stuff. And I've always been listening to so many different things. And then Mac coming after me, his aspect goes even further on, because then with streaming, with online, all those musicians were able to just do so much indie music that never hit the radio, that I would probably not even find if it wasn't for him telling me, oh, listen to this guy. And then because he's been growing up through that online music distribution process, he knows how to connect the dots where this guy influenced this guy influenced this other guy, and follow the charts. And then he keeps throwing stuff at me for me to study, if like, oh, you need to listen to this guy so then we can work on this other project. And that changed a lot. And to a certain degree, yes, you have to, it's good to specialize, but to a certain degree also, I think it's harder to find that one thing that you like and specialize on. I have students that are metal guitarists and performers, but they produce hip hop and urban styles, and they're very good at it also. But they grew up with both. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to get back to a technical question. I know you have an API legacy console in your A room, and you've done some mods to it. Mm-hmm. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. With all the different lab experiments that we've done at the studio and doing research and stuff, it has come up here or there that the sound of a studio for many, many years was defined by the console it was in, right? You have a Neve, you have an SSL, you have an API. Look at Sunset Studios, where they had one of the oldest APIs, but they built and custom made their preamps. And this console with this particular sounding preamps became famous, and so many artists went to that studio because of the sound of that board. So within all this process, it dawned on me, should we update the sound of Studio A to be more flexible and move the needle one direction or the other, so it's not just a room that, for all intents and purposes, for a lot of acoustic music, whether you're doing country or rock or metal, yeah, you want to record an API, that's amazing. But mixing in the box and mixing on an API board can be so different that sometimes people would say, is that the sound that I'm looking for? There's this association of, oh, that's a vintage sound, but I want a more modern sound, whatever that means, right? So I started experimenting with, let's figure out how to get a different sound and update and give us some flexibility. So the first thing I did is approach Paul Wolf, who at the time had already left API, sold API, and had founded
Tone Lux.
Thank you. And Ed and me have known Paul for a while, and I just called them out of the blue. It's like, hey, I got an itch to scratch. Can you help me modify the Stereo B summing bus for our API with your Tone Lux sound? And I guess the bestest way to describe his sound on the Tone Lux was somewhere between a Neve and an API. If you can imagine that, split it down the middle, it's like the best of both worlds in a way. So he was really curious about it, and we went back and forth, and he modified a circuit board and a couple components, and we sent it over and installed it.
Transformer and the op amp.
Right.
Basically. That's the sound of a discrete
console.
Circuit anyway.
Right.
So then now the little circuit board he designed is basically adapting his own op amps to work at the voltage and the input of a 2520 format. The op amps on his sockets weren't a 2520 format, right? So then we did that, and now we have Stereo A, which is a classic
the old API
sound, and Stereo B is the Tone Lux. And then I decided that I wanted to experiment some more. So then at some point, I got Ed involved again, and I'm like, hey, let's send a request for every person who's making a really, really high-end op amp to just send us and let me do a op amp shootout on a mix. So then we got 2 songs, and we ran all those songs through 4 different sets of op amps, and then just compared it. And then we ended up with another company called SLL that they made probably
Scott Lieber.
Yeah, Scott Lieber. Okay. He makes, I guess, I still think he makes the best 2520 API clone, but actually made it sound way better. It still has that essence of the API sound, but better top end extension, tighter, cleaner low end, but still with that growl that you want out of it. So then we ended up modifying Stereo A as having a Scott Lieber sound, Stereo B as the Paul Wolf Tone Lux sound, but we left the Grandmaster with all the original circuitry. So then now, depending how we want, we can have a more top-end, higher-end API sound, a more, what I would say, aggressive rock tone for a Tone Lux, or if we still want that vintagey classic sound for country or jazz, then we go through the Grandmaster, and then now we can just have some fun with a little bit of everything.
That's great. That's really great.
Thank you.
It's still an API board.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on those at the record plant, so and then wound up going to Criteria with the MCIs, which was a totally different world at that point.
I know some of our listeners here, they're pretty much always going to have the same question, which is acoustics. And should I put the McDonald's cup holders on my walls, and why should I not do that? Can you talk a little bit about like some of the decisions that went into some of the different rooms in terms of like acoustics? Were you involved in some of the acoustics in it, and maybe just some general tips that you would give someone in maybe like the worst case scenario, which would be like a cube sized room for their home studios?
Sure. It's been mainly me and Ed revamping and designing everything. I would figure out what's the new sound that I needed for Phat Planet, as we've done so many recordings, figuring out how to also modernize the sound and get the most out of the rooms. So then I would come up with the acoustic design for the room, sit down with Ed, figure out how to pull it off, and we always end up building it ourselves. And the revamps have gotten bigger and bigger and more complex, but the end result has been always a significant improvement to everything.
And every time we looked at store-bought products, always it was just horrible. Didn't like the performance, didn't like the price, didn't like the design. So we ended up building everything.
Right.
And custom building.
Ed has a very specific aesthetic that he wants to keep at the studio, and you can go from room to room, and it just has that vibe. So I've gotten I've become a pro carpenter thanks to Ed and all these projects that I've done with him. I mean, I literally started as an intern helping him build Studio B when it was still in pieces, and I learned how to cut drywall and lay wood flooring and do a whole bunch of things I never even thought I would do as an intern or as an engineer. But that's just been huge for me because I've continued with all that. So then things that we've done, for example, one of the last upgrades we did was completely revamp the sound of the main room in tracking room A. And I used a method of adding wood slats with a binary algorithm where you would have a reflection or absorption zone. And we were using 2-inch slats of wood with a specific gap in between them. And this randomization of this zeros and ones, absorption or reflection, creates a liveliness to the room. You avoid completely any flutter echoes. It gives a combination of reflection and diffraction. So it kind of spreads the sound evenly through the whole room without you necessarily being able to pinpoint this is a reflective surface, this is absorptive surface. And I got that from working in another studio where I could go to the complete opposite corner, which was 30, 40 feet away, and I could just be whispering the softest thing. And the other person in that corner could hear me clearly. Not that you would hear the voice wrapped within that room tone, but just the voice clearly projected there. And that interests me so much, where in I guess the most positive way, have a transparent sounding room that wasn't dead, because it doesn't sound dead. There is something to the room, but it doesn't necessarily impart this very defining color to it.
Right. Yeah. I know a lot of rooms, they just deaden everything as much as possible and then hope for the best.
Exactly. So then the idea with how I learned to do this is, yes, you deaden everything, and then you bring back the frequencies and the amount of liveliness that you need in a room.
So to figure out some of those things, were you using like a computer software, or was it just like through experience, or? A
little bit of everything, a whole bunch of research, books that I've bought, college books for acoustic design, diffusers, studio designs.
Don't forget calculating bass traps.
Calculating bass traps, yes, membrane bass traps and stuff like that. That just became another side project within all this aspect of audio. Yeah. And it became, the more I got into it, the more fun it was. And then again, Ed being so gracious to let me use the studio to experiment on all these things, which has been a positive for all of us. Yeah. And I think eventually when we got around to building the scoring stage, that happened during COVID lockdown, I was able to experiment with the complete opposite range of, let's make a really nice live sounding room, because we don't have a live room, where we have a room that's 20 by 30 with 18 feet high. And can we make this into a really nice drum room and just hear the drums pounding and resonating, but also work for, let's put a string ensemble, and whatever ambiance is there is soothing and pleasing. I got the amazing opportunity to go to Abbey Roads in Studio One and record the London Philharmonica for a project. And hearing that room with an orchestra is just breathtaking. It's just amazing. I literally got into the balcony, took out my phone, and recorded just a take of it, and then brought it back to the studio for everybody to hear. And we heard that recording from my cell phone, and everybody was like, that sounds like done. You don't need reverb, you don't need balance. Just that room recording was all that you need, straight from the cell phone. So that just kind of ignited a whole other set of ideas in the opposite direction. Let's not control the room. Let's tune the room to get the response that you want. So then we ended up building the room with different other techniques, polycylindrical panels to disperse the room, that absorb the low end and muddiness of a big room like that. But constantly, everything is spreading the high frequencies in every direction, so it just keeps that liveliness in a controlled way.
Yeah.
And then with with all the different rooms that we have, what we end up doing is let's pick the room that suits the instrument the best.
Gotcha.
I know the last time I was there, you had the piano in a room where you'd treated the ceiling. Is the piano still in that room with the, I guess it was sort of the Blackbird concept of different length diffusers in the ceiling?
Oh, the spiky room.
The spiky room.
We haven't done that in a long time.
Piano in the spiky room?
Oh yeah, we used to do that.
Oh, okay.
Ed originally wanted the spiky room to be the piano room.
I didn't know that.
And then when we did a couple of recordings, the main issue was it was a tight fit for the piano.
And also, it wasn't climate controlled enough for the piano.
That's true, because that became the hallway going in and out of the studios and from the back. And then the room was almost a little too live for some of the stuff. So
there's an ambiance to that.
Right, it is. There is. So it went back to the piano isolation room, but then now if we need to move it to the new scoring room, we've done live streaming jazz shows.
You can just move the piano.
Oh,
right. And
great.
Piano sounds amazing in that room.
We get the piano tuner to come out, move the piano, set it up, tune it, do whatever. He charges us for that, and it's fine. But right now, the piano sits in its little home, which is an ISO that's right next to the main Studio A room, which is its best spot for most situations, because whenever we do ensembles where we need piano and drums at the same time, they can all see each other through the glass, but the piano is isolated from the drums. We never want to get drums into the piano mics. Right. And considering we've got a $15,000 mic on the piano, it's super sensitive, and drums will get in there, whether you like it or not. There's nothing I hate worse than a constricted piano, where it's in the same room with the band, and then they put blankets all over it, and it just sounds horrible, like a big open piano sound. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have to do the hard work of putting it in a hard room with closed doors, completely isolated from the drums.
So bringing it back to basics, what would be some of the first things you would do? And just like if you just had like a spare bedroom and you wanted to make it to where you could track something, or maybe use it as a half tracking, half mixing scenario, what would be some of the maybe top 3 tips?
Buy synthesizers and things that can go direct.
Headphones.
DIs, get an amp simulator.
Yeah, amp sims. UAD stuff's nice.
Joking aside, amp simulators nowadays are so much
ridiculous
better in quality than it ever was, and I'd be hard pressed to say I won't allow that in my recording or anything like that. It sounds so good that it can work just fine. And for whatever other acoustic purposes you need, then you need some sort of treatment. It's become more and more a necessity of me helping musicians and producers design and build a control room that also is the tracking room. The vocalist will be right there behind the engineer or acoustic guitar or doing whatever else they need to do, and it's all in one room at the same time. Sometimes that's better than trying to take a walk-in closet and stuff it with acoustic treatment, and then you can't use the closet for anything else.
Right.
So then, without getting too technical, and stop me if I start doing that, the smaller the room, the more chaotic the bass happens to function in that room. So the hardest thing to do is you have to do a good amount of bass trapping, and getting bass trapping to be compact in a small room is even harder. That bass trapping can take so much space out of the whole thing. One way of thinking about it and approaching it would be work from the bottom up, meaning you have to start treating the low end first. The smaller the room, the more chaotic the sub and bass range are. And if that low end isn't treated correctly, it will blur and, to a point, distort your high end and stereo image. So you start by treating as much as possible the low end, as effective as you can and as low frequency as you can, and then start working your way up of doing mid and high frequencies as much as is needed in the room. Start with the typical first points of reflection that you can put a mirror, and if you can see yourself in the mirror and the speaker, then those are reflection points you need to take care of, and then work your way up from there. The other aspect can be if you're trying to use that room for recording and mixing, which tends to be done a lot. There are options, for example, like a chaotic eyeball, which is basically like a huge Nerf basketball that they cut a hole out for you to put a microphone. It has a built-in pop filter. That will take care of eliminating most of the room out of it. So then you can have a chaotic eyeball in the room, and then with good enough acoustic treatment for your mixing and production aspects and a little additional treatment for that chaotic eyeball, you should be able to get a lot done in that room and without much acoustic interference.
Cool. Now, just the last question in terms of that. Obviously, we're talking panels, not the foam or the McDonald's cup holders.
No McDonald's, no egg crates, no foam. This is, there's plenty of options nowadays and a lot more research to say the foam doesn't do anything.
Gotcha. Cool. Now, Matt, as the role of a director of artist relations, what would be some of your top tips for listeners when they're first trying to engage a studio for the first time? So they're trying to call in, or maybe they want to email. What would be some of maybe the do's and don'ts of what you find is kind of either very popular or refreshing when someone does?
Sure. Let's see. I always kind of figure that when you are looking for a recording studio, you're also kind of looking for your team, somebody that you want to hang out with, essentially that's going to contribute, and help you grow and learn. It's very common for us at the end of a session, if we hear a group of musicians say, that was a great hang, it's never, what a great session we had today. That was a great hang. It should feel completely normal and natural. You should really enjoy the time of working on your material. This is something you've thought about and worked on your entire life getting up to that moment. So spend your time just feeling it out with those people. I think a lot of people approach recording studios somewhat surgically, or like they're just picking up some groceries. It's a very transactional thing, when to us, this is so personal. Even for your work to sound great and for us to be able to contribute to delivering something that's even better than what you had anticipated or thought. And we, as working members of recording studio, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this. I listen to rough mixes and production mixes over and over and over and over after hours. I love it. I want to hear and allow the music to speak to me, and to hear what's next for the production. So be friendly when you call the studio. A lot of people, I don't know, they just want price information, and that's that, rather than going, well, what do you get for that price? Know? And we have such a wide range of services that we do, over 4,000 square feet, that people go, how much is it? They don't even say hi. It's like, hey man, I'll try to stop them. How you doing today?
Those aren't the serious ones.
No, it's true. But how much for what? You know, so go in with a different mentality. I think I always try to work with the artist to understand what it is they're trying to do, how we might be able to integrate into that, and ultimately, how can we make it fit your budget? You know, we can't work with everybody who comes to us, but by at least trying to approach it as a friend working relationship, I think that's the best approach, because you're going to be vulnerable with this person when you're in the booth. We're going to hear your lips smacking. You know, you're going to, hey, go take a bite of green apple or some whiskey or something.
Yeah.
But it's all about really getting the artist comfortable. And that comes from the moment you ring somebody up or you send an email, you know. So.
Yeah. I know when I was doing my apprenticeship and internship and everything, I used to be at KDS Studios, and the people who'd call there, when I was answering phones, they would be sweating on the phone, and you could just tell that they were super nervous calling the studio, and it's just like, yo, chill out.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes people are just so like, they get so hung up and they overthink everything, because it's like, wow, I'm not just hanging out or calling my friend asking him if he can record me. It's like, oh, this is like a big commercial facility and blah blah. So that's really cool how like you know, some of the things that you're talking about was this should be a friend at the end of the day. Right. You know, it should feel like you're done with the session and you just made a new friend, rather than this is just my engineer and we're just strictly working here and like, cool, we'll see you. And you know, most of the time I would imagine like you guys spend a little bit more extra time just going back and forth and, you know, maybe even going to get a drink or something.
Yeah, having coffee, hanging out. I mean, there was something that came to mind. I forget.
Matt has had conversations with people and then get invited to go play golf with them. And then
which I don't play golf.
And cut deals at the golf course for this album afterwards.
Many years ago.
Yeah, but that was a good one.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Getting invited to people's like houses to go jet ski and like, you know, play bass for them, that sort of stuff. But it should be really fluid. So I guess the don'ts are don't really worry about it too much. You know, have a good time. That's what we all got into this for. We love music. It consumes us. It makes us feel a certain way. Just be who you are, you know?
Now, I think this is probably going to be my last question. And it's something that sometimes a lot of people are afraid to ask, but, you know, we're all friends here, right?
Yep.
So, so what would be the main difference, in your opinion, between, for example, someone going to a commercial facility versus like your project studio versus a home studio? Because nowadays project studios are just very popular. You know, people could just buy a bunch of gear, set it up. But in terms of the commercial facility, what are the, I guess, advantages? Obviously, you know, having more equipment versus, you know, just doing it in a project studio and paying someone at that level.
I know we all have a lot of thoughts about this.
I'll give you my definition, and then you can expound on that.
Sure.
So I came up with this kind of definition many years ago. The difference between a project studio and a pro studio is the project studio is one engineer or producer all day, every day. It never changes, because the design of the project studio is to serve that one person. In a pro studio, you have a collective of many minds, many engineers, many producers that work together to support the music. So it's very often where Matt will work on something and he wants me to hear it. He wants my opinion. I want Aaron's opinion on something that I'm working on, and we bounce, we criticize.
He criticizes a lot.
You don't get that dynamic in a project studio, because we're supporting each other and criticizing each other and complimenting each other constantly in order to better the product to its final and masterful capability. That is the primary difference. And also Matt's expertise in choosing the engineer that is going to be best for that song or best for that music. Or let's say if we're working on a TV show or a movie, And we can't call a junior engineer to work on an ADR session for a major motion picture that requires a
Standards
high
are too
degree
high.
of technical capability. We need an A-list, you know. So every pro studio has multiple levels of engineers. You got your A-list guys, your B guys, and your entry-level guys. And so there's certain things that you have to choose the right person for that job, for that music, for that artist. Sometimes you just know that artist is not going to work with this engineer because of the vibe of their personalities.
Right.
So you got to pick the right person. That's Matt's golden expertise, is being able to pair that up and make that happen. So that's the main difference in my opinion of between a pro and a project studio.
And jumping on that, a lot of all the people that work at the studio then also have to kind of stop and just leave their ego at the door, because when Matt gets the call of like, you're the person I need for this project, I've been here the longest, besides Ed, of course. I've been here for 18 years. I can say I have seniority and say, just give me all the projects I want. But there are projects that I'll have a chat with Matt, and then as soon as he's telling me, I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm the right person for it. And then at the end of it says, I think I'm going to give it to this person. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good call. I think I'd rather do that. And then all of us still collaborate. All of us are still in communication. As soon as that project is done, that went to another engineer, I want to hear it. I want to listen to it. I want to text that engineer up. It's like, great job. Oh, by the way, I heard this. I had this other idea. I want you to try this or that. Within that whole collaboration aspect also that you get in a facility like ours is, the point you said, we have a lot of gear. We have a lot of gear, but not just the fact that we have the gear, it's the fact that since I started working there, I've been doing equipment shootout, gear shootout, microphone testing. I've brought a saxophone and thrown 30 microphones. I've brought a 412 cab and a metal guitarist and literally threw 48 microphones on that 412 cab to test what is really the best guitar microphone. And I'll say it's not an SM57 in my opinion. When you have a plethora of microphones to choose and you realize, this is a standard and it's a standard for a reason, but is it the best piece of equipment for that task? No, it isn't. Because I know every microphone in the studio, and anytime I do these shootouts, I'm ringing in everybody, whether it's engineers that work at the studio or other producers and engineers that are friends of ours. Let's get some beer, get a pizza, and just play around with the equipment. And
don't forget that we built 2 microphones as well.
and part of that has been, as soon as Ed came up with the idea, I want to build some microphones, I'm like, okay, well, I want you to mod these microphones this way because of the testing that we've done. Yep. And same thing, I build custom studio monitors. I've built them, put them in the studio, and have everybody send me text messages, what's good and bad, and then tweak them and collaborate in that way. So when you have a facility that has an integral knowledge of their entire gear library, that I can get a text message from one of the newer, younger engineers who is in the middle of a session and say, I have to record this. What do you recommend? And it's 10 o'clock at night when the session is saying, like, sure, get this microphone, get this preamp, hook it up this way. Oh, and by the way, here's some presets that I keep. Here's a picture of how I would set it up.
That's huge. That's huge. That's huge.
Conversely, the project studio engineer, he goes on YouTube to find that.
Right.
Right. Which YouTube's a great knowledge base, but it's not dedicated to, you don't know the room, you don't quite know exactly the mic, you don't quite know the techniques, and you're absent of that interaction of like, yes, I saw this person do it this way, but does he know the instrument, the person, the end result? Is it R&B? Is it metal? Is it jazz? All those things are absent within that conversation. But there is a plethora of knowledge that any engineer can text Ed or me at any time and say, what do you recommend? Or even in preparation for that session, we can have a conversation. It doesn't matter if I'm doing the session, I'm the engineer or not. I'll give that knowledge to anybody who's working in the studio.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to make a note about pre-production and how valuable that is. And, being that I grew up getting on Pro Tools at age 16, in 2000, I guess it was. I come from that world. Without that world, I wouldn't be here. And the preparation of the recording process is so vital to how the experience is going to go. I commonly tell artists, the better prepared you are when you come in here, the quicker, frankly, the cheaper it's going to be.
Yeah.
If we have to doctor up everything, if we have to write your melodies in Melodyne for you, that is all just going to suck up budget. So pre-production is incredibly important. I've worked with artists where I've heard they've literally recorded the entire record twice by the time they got to the recording studio. They've workshopped all the ideas. They spent the time behind the scenes doing that, but conversely knew that the fidelity that they needed to compete in the major market, or even the indie markets. What's a major market anymore? But they knew that the quality is going to come from actually the fidelity that can be achieved in a studio environment with the treatments, with those mini mic options, with the collective. But workshop your songs before you get to the studio. Know that you can sing them. Know that you can perform them. Otherwise it's patchwork.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on the Reel to Reel podcast from the Melrose Center. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, joined by my co-host, Drigo, and we'd like to thank our guests, Ed Krout, Aaron Gandia, and Matt Kamm. We have so much more in store coming up on future episodes. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcasting app. Join us next month for another episode with another exclusive look at life behind the board in the audio industry, where our guests will be Joe Galdo and Juan Perez. And thanks to Carol Hensel for our theme music.